Why is it that the bigger your business gets, the more successful you become as an entrepreneur, the more money you have in the bank, the more that you have this strange desire to just burn the whole thing down, destroy the business, walk away, and go back to a much simpler life, perhaps living in the woods or something like that? It's so counterproductive because from the outside everything seems so great, and yet on the inside all you're experiencing is dissatisfaction, dissonance, even unhappiness. Well, in this video I'm going to unpack this a little bit from the perspective of the creative entrepreneur, so that if you're experiencing even just a semblance of this, it'll give you a way to think about it and understand what's going on. My name is Olly Richards. I'm the founder of StoryLearning.com. It's a multi-million-dollar online education business. I'm also a mentor and advisor to other online education entrepreneurs. And I'll tell you, the bigger and more successful the entrepreneur is that I meet, typically the more they're struggling with exactly this. So even if you're not experiencing this right now, chances are that some version of this is waiting for you in the future. So let's take a very, very straightforward, reductive version of this. And I'm going to contrast the creative and the intellectual. There are other facets to our minds and our personalities, but typically with online education businesses, we all start our businesses from a creative place. Perhaps we're teachers or we're artists or we're musicians or something like that, and we have this desire to create. And because we also have this desire to teach, we tend to put stuff out there in the world, and then for some of us it ends up gaining traction, becoming popular, and we find ourselves with these online businesses, right? And creativity is what we've spent most of our lives doing. It's who we are. It's why we start our businesses in the first place. But then what happens over time is that inevitably we end up having to think much more intellectually about everything that's going on in our lives. So our business starts here, and the creativity and our natural charisma gets us up to this point, and then we start having real success. The business grows, and before we know it, we are knees deep in spreadsheets, in operational targets, in hiring, in financial management, and so we are pretty much exclusively here. Now, for certain types of people, like engineers, I have a bunch of engineer friends who absolutely love existing in this space because that's just naturally who they are. It's not to say that they're not creative, often they are, but they've just got this sort of very systematic, cool-headed way of thinking that allows them to exist very well in an intellectual space. So why is this actually a problem? Well, if you think about why it is that we started our businesses in the first place, there are many reasons, but it often comes down to money, because if we are creative types, we probably don't have any money. I always tell the story of how just 10 years ago I was an English teacher making £800, about $1,000 a month, and I had no money. So although money wasn't the main reason for me to start my first business, I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't a big part of it. Well, if I could make money, well, it's at least going to make my life a little bit easier. So money is a factor for us starting what we do. Creativity, or creativity as it's written there, creativity is the other big thing. We just have this, often if we're stuck in jobs, or we're a musician and we're stuck doing gigs we don't really want to do, actually what the online business does is it allows us to express our creativity in our own unique way, and it's very liberating. Actually, I always marvel at the fact that with Story Learning, for example, there's a business here that I've built entirely from my own volition. There's not many things in life that you can do where you can literally build the house that you live in the shape, in your own image, or in whatever image you want. And a business is amazing for enabling you to do that. And so this creativity is a major force for us actually starting what we do in the first place. The other thing, and for me I think this was the number one thing, and of course it's tied into money, but it's freedom. And it's the ability for us to just live life on our own terms, because for an entrepreneurial type, the thing that drives us to actually do this in the first place is that very freedom from money, from salaries, from wages, from jobs, to actually express our creativity, and that the net result of this is a kind of freedom. So if we just take these as our driving forces for starting our business in the first place, that's really pretty great in the early stages. Although we're working really hard, we're hustling like hell, it's exciting, and we're seeing that we're starting to make money. We're seeing that we're starting to have an impact on people. For me, I remember publishing my first books and thinking, what the hell's going on? It's really exhilarating, and you usually have a small team. It's just you operating at this point with a few helpers. But then the business starts to grow, and you start to enter this phase with all of those things we were talking about before. One of the downsides of a bigger business is that there's more at stake and there's more at risk than when you first got started. If you didn't work 1 month, well, nothing really is going to happen. But if you don't work for 1 month here in a business of this size, what happens is people don't get paid, people start leaving, and now you have to go back into your email to answer customer service inquiries, which you really, really don't want to do. Similarly, if things don't go wrong, if you don't hit your sales targets or whatever, you start to burn money at a scary rate. If you were at that stage, you probably wondered, was this really what I wanted? Almost certainly not, but it's where you end up if you just follow this inevitable growth path. But the other thing about getting here is you now no longer have these reasons that you started the business in the first place. Right? The money, you've got money, but the thing is you now no longer have the desire for money. You don't need it anymore because you've got plenty of it, which means this core driving force is now taken away. You now no longer have the creativity because you're spending all your time in spreadsheets. If you want to go off and make a video about something that you're interested in, like that doesn't help you sell this product that you've got to sell. So you now no longer have that creative freedom that you were yearning for in the first place. You have no freedom. You're working a 9 to 5 like everyone else, except it's in your own business. Yeah, okay, that's cool. And lots of people would love to trade position for you. As a creative person, it just doesn't cut the mustard for you. It's not good enough. You don't want to live that way. You would much rather have something a lot simpler and maintain your creative freedom, right? So like it or not, for good or for ill, this is where you end up. And these are the tensions that leave you feeling this strange sense of dissatisfaction that you really find it difficult to tell to anybody else. When you tell anybody this stuff, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? You have everything. Why are you complaining? And we feel guilty about feeling this way. We feel like we shouldn't complain. And yet, you can't ignore reality. Okay? The thing about us as entrepreneurs is our personality types often represent a tiny fraction of 1, 2, 3% of the population. Most people do not understand the way that our minds work, the way that our minds operate. When we get into trouble mentally or spiritually, it becomes a very lonely place because it's almost impossible to talk to other people about this, except for other entrepreneurs in your own situation, right? Which is why groups of entrepreneurs are so valuable, because they allow you to just have some kind of solace. But even then, everyone's at a slightly different journey, right? So you may have an entrepreneurial friend who's at exactly the same place as you, but they're a more kind of intellectual, hustling type, and they don't experience any of this stuff. They want to keep scaling or growing or whatever. But you are where you are, and one of the keys, I think, to a happy life is to acknowledge where you are and not to try and push through that and double down on that just because that's what you think you should be doing because everybody else is. So what can you do in this situation? Well, the first thing that everybody tries, which is I think the correct thing to do, is to start to restructure the organization so you are now no longer the person at the helm. I think the best paradigm for this is the visionary integrator paradigm from the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. If you don't know what this is, go and read the book Rocket Fuel. It's fantastic. What this does is this puts a firewall in between you as the creative lead of the company and the actual day-to-day management of the company. So the boss at the company effectively becomes the integrator, and then whatever you want to do, you have to get permission from them. But inevitably what ends up happening is you don't completely let go, because when you build a team around the thing that you have built, they don't have, as good as they may be, as a player, experienced pros as they may be, they don't have that same creative genius that led you to start your business in the first place. And so you can't help but sit on the sidelines. You become a backseat driver in your own business, which is the most destructive place of all, because now your team doesn't have the freedom that they need to actually make their own decisions. And you want to give them that freedom, but you also feel in the back of your mind, man, I just don't know if they really get it. And you've got this lingering doubt about the wisdom of you really stepping back. And so what happens? You end up inevitably getting involved again. And where this starts to get a bit trickier is that if you start to read books on scaling, or if you look at the wider world of corporate or entrepreneurship, then this becomes extremely important, because you do need an integrator who can build a bigger team, who can continue to scale the business to who knows what height. But the thing with creative type businesses is that we have natural constraints based on the size of our audience. So if you are a podcaster, for example, you can build the best business in the world underneath your podcast on the back end, but you're not going to be able to continue to infinitely growth hack what you've got, because your fundamental constraint is the amount of traffic that you're able to send into the business from the podcast. You don't have a business where you can just continue to kind of grow infinitely. You would have to then start to switch to paid media, which then becomes a completely different business and likely doesn't work with the thing that you've got. So the point being that as a creator type business, you have very hard constraints that normal, quote unquote, normal businesses don't have. And what this for me means is that the visionary integrator thing has to start to adapt and evolve a little bit, because rather than putting the integrator in charge of actually growing the company, certain percentage points year on year, the real role and objective of this person now is to simply hold the fort. It's to run the most optimal version of the business within its natural constraints. So if the business is not a business that can keep scaling, let's say it has a natural ceiling here and it can't go any further without fundamentally reinventing itself, which, let's face it, you probably don't want to do, then the question becomes, how can we create this crack squad of great people who can just run the business the way it should, so that you can then focus on just doing the things that you want to do, which are the creative things that made you successful in the first place. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where brick walls start to appear. This is where we start to feel all this dissonance come in. It's all very well, Ollie, you're sitting here pointing out all the problems, but what can we do about it? There are a million tactical answers and only a couple of really good strategic answers. Your first option is to burn it down. And this happens more than you would like to think. It happens a lot at smaller levels as well. Business entrepreneurs you never even hear of will end up just going out like a star in the night sky, because they're just not able to either grow the business to a point where a team can effectively manage it, or else they can't deal with it when they get to that stage and they just prefer to walk away and do something else. Option number 2 is some kind of version of hiring the CEO who can run the entire company from top to bottom, while you either continue to do the creative things that you like within the business, or you walk away. Now, for a lot of us, it's very difficult not to keep meddling. And so in this scenario, it may be that the best thing to do is to walk away, put a firewall in between you and the business, and then actually have the team continue to run it in the background. Now, if you're a creator, that's very difficult because you're the face of the business. And so this is where you might want to very seriously define exactly what you're going to do. I'm going to produce 1 podcast a week. I'm going to do 2 YouTube videos a week. Like, that's your role essentially transitions into chief creative officer in the business, where you don't even need to know what goes on behind the scenes. You just want to do your thing and enjoy it. So you might be tied to the business in that way, but that's cool because it doesn't actually take that much time for the most part, and it's the thing you enjoy. But these are obviously quite extreme scenarios. The more powerful version of this, in my opinion, is to actually change direction. And this is hard to do because it involves being very proactive, intentional, deliberate about it, and fully owning the reality. The most difficult thing about this paradigm is owning the reality and accepting that this is what's going on. Because we all want to think that we can continue to grow and scale our business, and we all want to have the $100 million version of our business. But the problem with these kind of thoughts is they don't take into account the reality of what you've got to do in order to get there. And so if we assume, which I think is the case with almost everybody, that you don't want to go through the kind of stuff that you would have to go through in order to get there, with increasing levels of stress, high chances of failure, etc., etc. If you just want to enjoy the money, creativity, and freedom that you have earned for yourself, then what is incumbent on you to do is to fully, radically own the situation and say, right, I accept my creative disposition. I accept the way I am. I accept the kind of life that I want to live with creativity and freedom in it. And as a result of that, accepting all of those things, accepting the natural limits and boundaries around where my business is, then I'm going to take the very bold, very radical decision to actually change direction in the business, whether that means pivoting entirely or evolving it into a new niche or a new space, changing the type of business that we run on the back end, simplifying it, but doing whatever it takes to create that version of the business that is going to be in alignment with who you are, what you truly want, the team and people that you want around you, the lifestyle that you want to allow for, and the creativity and freedom in your day-to-day life that you want. Because if you take ownership of this, you can create an incredible version of life for yourself. I'd love to know from you in the comments if you're in this situation, if there's anything that you've done that's helped you. If you'd like more on this, please subscribe to the channel. You can also find a very large, completely free case study of how I grew my business Story Learning to millions of dollars in revenue. It's called Anatomy of a $10 million Online Education Business, and you can get it at ollyrichards.co. So go ahead and check that out. And a few points in this video, I've mentioned that creator businesses can struggle to scale. And if you want to know a little bit more about why that happens and what you can do about it, check out this video over here where I go into a lot of detail about the various dynamics of this. It's going to help you if you have a creator business.